Today, we're diving into one of the boldest industrial plans on the entire planet. We're talking about Bangladesh's mission to build a $100 billion synthetic apparel empire, all by 2030. But look, this is about so much more than just sewing clothes. It's about a nation completely re-engineering its economic future. And it all boils down to one simple yet incredibly powerful idea. You know, this quote right here, it just cuts right to the chase. For decades, the global apparel game was all about one thing: who had the cheapest labor? Well, that era is coming to a close. To really get where Bangladesh is headed, you have to look at its biggest rival. China isn't winning because it's cheap anymore. It wins because it has built an industrial fortress, a completely integrated system where every single piece of the puzzle, from a raw chemical to a finished jacket, is made and controlled right there.
And this slide really lays it all out. Think of Bangladesh today as a world-class assembly line. I mean, they're the #2 apparel exporter in the world. That's huge. But they're mostly putting together parts that were made somewhere else. About 75% of their exports are still good old-fashioned cotton. And for synthetics, which is where the market is booming, they have to import a staggering 80% of their materials. So the goal for 2030 is to stop just being the assembly line and to build the entire industrial engine. We're talking the petrochemical plants, the fiber spinners, the fabric mills, the whole shebang, all on home turf.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at why this is so urgent. There's literally a ticking clock. Then we'll get into the details of the massive $32 billion blueprint. After that, we'll explore how they plan to attract the investors to pay for it all. And finally, we'll talk about the massive payoff if they pull this off. All right, so let's start with the why, because this isn't just some nice-to-have project. It's an absolute necessity. And that clock I mentioned, it is ticking very, very loudly. So check this out. This chart shows a really dangerous disconnect. If you look at the global market, 75% of it is now man-made, synthetic fibers. But if you look at Bangladesh's exports, it's the complete opposite. 75% is still cotton. They are, essentially, the heavyweight champion of a sport that the rest of the world is moving on from. And that, my friends, is a huge economic risk. And here it is, the hard deadline. November 24th, 2026. That's the day Bangladesh officially graduates from its least developed country status. Now, that's a fantastic sign of progress, right? But it also comes with a massive threat. It could lose its duty-free access to key markets, like the European Union. Without that tariff advantage, trying to compete on price alone becomes almost impossible. This is the tariff cliff that's forcing the country to pivot, to compete on things like value, speed, and capability, not just rock-bottom cost. And that brings us to the solution. You see, you can't solve an ecosystem-level problem with just one new factory. You need a national-level blueprint. And what they've come up with is one of the most ambitious industrial plans you'll find anywhere in the world today. So, what's the price tag for building this brand new industrial engine from scratch? A cool $32 billion. Yeah, this is not about small tweaks. We're talking about a monumental capital investment to build everything from the ground up and completely reshape the country's industrial landscape. So what exactly does $32 billion buy you? Well, to really compete, Bangladesh has to move upstream. Right now, it completely dominates in Tier 1. That's the final assembly, the sewing of the clothes. But the real value, the real control, is created way earlier. This means building everything from Tier 4, that's the plants making the core chemicals, the basic building blocks of polyester, all the way through the other tiers that spin that into yarn and weave it into fabric. The goal is simple: own the entire chain. Now, this isn't just a random shopping list of factories. It's a brilliantly designed, geographically optimized strategy. It's called the 3+2 Integrated Corridor. Here's how it works. Zone 1, down on the coast in Chattogram, becomes the petrochemical hub. It takes in the raw materials. Then, Zone 2, in a place called Kumila, takes those chemicals and turns them into fiber and yarn. And finally, Zone 3, in the traditional textile heartland of Narayanganj, weaves that yarn into high-tech, high-value fabric. It's basically a seamless industrial highway, designed from the get-go for maximum speed and efficiency. Okay, but let's be real. A $32 billion plan is just a nice PowerPoint slide without the capital to back it up. So the big question is, how does Bangladesh convince global investors to fund this massive transformation? That's where the investor playbook comes in. They aren't just crossing their fingers and hoping for investment. No, they are actively engineering it with an incredibly aggressive policy package designed to go head-to-head with rivals like China and Vietnam. We're talking a 10-year tax holiday for those crucial upstream sectors, a 15% capital subsidy for the huge anchor investors who build the petrochemical plants, and a secure 99-year land lease model to make setting up shop fast and safe. It's a giant neon sign to global capital that says Bangladesh is open for business, and we are serious.
And here's the kicker. This isn't just a passion project for the nation. It's designed to be seriously profitable for investors. The financial models are projecting some very attractive returns. The IRR, which is basically a measure of profitability, actually gets higher as you move up the value chain. So while the foundational petrochemical plants in Zone 1 offer a solid 13 to 16% return, that number climbs as high as 22% for the more advanced fabric processing in Zone 3. The message is clear. There's real money to be made here.
So, let's fast forward. The plan works, the investment pours in, the engine gets built. What's the ultimate payoff? What does this new and improved Bangladesh look like to the rest of the world? Well, for starters, one of the biggest game changers is pure speed. By not having to wait for materials to ship from halfway around the world, this new integrated model can slash lead times from a painful 120 days all the way down to just 45 to 60 days. In the fast fashion industry, where speed is literally everything, cutting your delivery time in half, that is a killer competitive advantage. And all of this leads to the ultimate prize, a total transformation of its global identity. Bangladesh wants to move from being seen as just a low-cost place to sew clothes to becoming an essential, strategic supply chain partner. For all those global brands looking to diversify away from China, the famous China Plus One strategy, Bangladesh is positioning itself to be the most logical, most capable, and most integrated alternative on the map.
It all adds up to this: the grand prize, the big number that this entire national strategy is aiming for: $100 billion in apparel exports by 2030. It is an incredibly audacious goal, to nearly double their current exports in less than a decade. But this synthetic revolution, it's the only way they're going to get there. So in the end, it really all comes back to this one powerful idea. The future of global manufacturing isn't going to be won by the company with the most sewing machines or the lowest wages. It's going to be won by the nation with the most complete, the most efficient, and the most integrated industrial ecosystem. Bangladesh has the blueprint, and now the race is on to build it.